to look at all of the tape on offensive linemen, and I see people that watch a lot of the tape, but then when you listen to it, don't actually know what they're looking at. So I like to look at some of the guys, like when you talk about like Brandon Thorne, and who really knows what he's looking at to a point. Like you can kind of say the same for Olin Kreutz and stuff. I What I do like is I think it's a good fit. I think you're looking at a guy that had is an ascending player, is getting better, has been fairly steady, has been consistent, that the Atlanta Falcons wanted to bring back, but they had problems with in terms of their cap, so they had to make decisions. So they weren't able to bring him back. So I think it's a good move because the whole point is you want to solidify the middle of that offensive line, because you ask any quarterback what would they prefer to have pressure up the middle or pressure around the sides. They don't want the pressure up the middle because it really stops what they're able to do. Like they expect kind of on their blind side or even kind of the battles on the outside that that's a possibility that they could get sacked, but sometimes they see that and have the opportunity to get out. If you're constantly getting destroyed up the middle, we saw it multiple times last year where within 2 seconds there's already a guy on him. Like adding Dahlman, adding Tooney, adding Jackson, it solidifies the interior. Does it mean that you stop adding? No, because I always say the offensive line you have in week 1 will not be the offensive line you have in week 17. So you need to make sure that you have good depth because guys are going to get hurt. It happens every single year. It's almost a guarantee. So I like what they've done. I think it's definitely logically makes sense, smart business, I think. But now they need to continue it and keep kind of going and trying to improve that position.
Yeah, we don't have to go too far into this draft, but I think first few, Paul, I know you're not super into the draft and into the mocks as much as maybe Kieran and I have like been just listening to everybody. I putting in hours and hours, Kieran, lately of like preparing myself for the draft earlier than usual. So
Mm-hmm.
can we just agree Abdul Carter is the number one pick, and that's just
Yeah.
how it's going to go. So
Yeah,
I think
that's
we can
happening.
agree there. It gets a little interesting with Cleveland, but I think their move with Kenny Pickett today also solidifies the fact that they're just not that interested in getting a quarterback this year, extending Myles Garrett and just showing him that the window that they're envisioning, I think, is longer than this year. So maybe like I think the Cleveland Browns in an ideal world would suck for another year a little bit and start producing a little bit more star players so that the year after they can somehow get out of the Deshaun Watson contract and maybe get a top, quarterback next year with like a top 5 pick. I don't know. How are your thoughts? I think the consensus is they're not going quarterback, right?
If it was me, I wouldn't. But that's because I don't like the quarterbacks this year.
Right.
In the position that they're in, they need to accumulate talent. I would say that they should be going for a guy like Travis Hunter, but will they? Look, in reality, when we get to this point in April, I think a trade is coming at this point, and someone's going to move up. But
Hmm.
for the basis of this, I think the first team that ends up picking a quarterback is going to be the Giants.
I agree. Yeah. I think that's interesting that you said of the trade. I don't know who they would trade with, and I don't know who's worth trading for in this draft. I think it's almost one of those bad drafts where you're stuck to stick and pick. And
Yeah,
so maybe they're going to be just forced, like you said, to take Travis Hunter. And other than I can't
other
even name their
team.
other opposite cornerback on the other side. But the Browns probably do need some help at corner, help Myles Garrett kind of lock down a certain side of the defense. So
Hmm.
I'm cool with that. I agree completely. I think the Giants are in an unavoidable situation to draft Cam Ward at this point, considering Aaron Rodgers probably off the board. Sam Darnold's off the board in terms of free agency. Got Justin Fields. So Cam Ward, we're in agreement.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think the Patriots is where it gets interesting. And I think
Mm.
I feel much more obvious about this one than I think people do, but I'd like to see what you say.
Who did they add today?
So they did get defensive tackle from the Eagles. What was his name? Milton Williams, I think it was.
Mm. They
So
need
they
they need to add an offensive lineman.
Is it that obvious? Okay. And so I've
Mhm,
seen, I don't know how you what places you listen to,
mhm.
and you know, maybe you do your own evaluation. I've heard
I listen to
Armand
no
Membu.
one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Armand Membu has been basically firing up the board even over Will Campbell and everybody else. I think if they do pick somebody, it's going to be a physical freak like Armand Membu, more than Will Campbell. How about you?
yeah, I've spoken to a couple of the beat guys over in for the Patriots and good friends with them, and they seem to think that they would prefer someone like Membu, who's a natural offensive tackle, versus someone like Will Campbell that there's every possibility that he gets moved onto the inside. So I'd say Membu's going to be the first offensive lineman taken in the draft purely because Josh Simmons' injury. If he wasn't injured, it would be him.
Okay, I agree. That was where I was going with my I thought it was a little bit more obvious comment than I think most
Hmm.
people do. So I agree. Membu is probably number one. Jags, again, I think people are overthinking it a little bit. How about you?
Yeah, it's a again. I think they've got to protect Trevor Lawrence if they're going to try and build around him. I still think eh, this is why I struggle with offensive linemen getting to 10. Where they go, I'm not sure. Now they did get rid of they still need some help on the interior, so there's a possibility that you could see a Mason Graham going at this point as well. But I do think that they're gonna probably go offensive line because they're gonna need to keep improving that, and they've lost a couple of players over the last couple of years. So I won't be surprised if it was Will Campbell. For me, it's probably between him and Mason Graham at this point.
Interesting. I feel like Will Campbell is the ultimate Jacksonville Jaguars draft too high, probably overdraft, and he busts a little bit and doesn't do
Hmm.
as well as anybody thinks. Will Campbell feels like the stupid one. I
Yep.
think Mason Graham feels like the obvious one, but I'm going to go
Hmm.
with you and say if they're all behind Trevor, which makes sense, it's their crazy investment, and I think you know, I don't think they have inspired any confidence with the rest of their front office or coaching staff to make good decisions moving forward. So let's go with Will Campbell. Okay.
Hmm.
You said you
Yes.
have a strong feeling that the Raiders go Ashton Genty now with Pete Carroll.
100%.
Yeah. Is it that
Yeah.
obvious? Okay.
Hmm.
I have
For
heard a
me, it
lot of people
is.
say that. I just don't know why. I'm curious as to why it's so obvious to a lot of people.
For me, it's look, could they go receiver? Maybe. I think the way they're gonna like when you look at what they did in terms of training for Gino, like he has his limitations. He's gonna need a pretty good running game. That's when he was good with Seattle when they had multiple guys there. What does Pete Carroll know for his offense is like it's very reminiscent of Marshawn Lynch in terms of what he was able to provide for him, breaking a load of tackles. I see something similar with Ashton Genty. I think the way they've set up is this is probably the first spot of where he could potentially go. And
I
that's
like
why I think I would go that way.
I like your explanation of it. Jets having picked up Justin Fields, I don't feel like that's a long term solution at cornerback for them, and I don't think they think he's the long term solution. But I think they believe he's a 2 year plan, and
Hmm.
so I don't know how much they're going to invest offensively to help him out, rather than potentially. I think if Mason Grahams falls to the Jets, I looking at Aaron Glenn and what he likes to do, I can't fathom them ignoring Mason Graham at 7. I don't know
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah. This is why I don't think Mason Graham actually gets to 10 because the three teams in front of them would probably draft Mason Graham.
Yeah.
So that's why I think this is probably the first spot of if he did fall, it doesn't matter. He's going to get drafted there.
That or somebody's going to trade with the Jets to go get him, right? I mean, somebody
Hmm.
falls in love with Mason Graham, I think. So, um, Panthers is an interesting one. I think the same logic you applied to maybe, you know, uh, sorry, the same logic you applied with like Jacksonville and taking a tackle. I feel like they're just all in on protecting uh, Bryce Young and giving him weapons, and they don't have a single receiver on that team. I don't think Tetaroa McMillan is He gives me Mike Evans, but discount Mike Evans so bad.
Mhm.
And nowhere near the prospect that Mike Evans was when he was coming out, but that's what I think he provides. And it makes the most sense in terms of on paper and giving him weapons. And there you haven't picked up anybody yet. I don't know if they're gonna, but there are obviously a lot of places that wide receivers still have to go. You know, Keenan Allen and the like. I don't think he'd go to Carolina. But what are your thoughts? I think Tetairoa McMillan makes sense, but even like a guy like Tyler Warren, if people fell in love with, makes sense here too.
I don't think,
It makes
real quick,
sense.
I don't think a lot of things that Carolina does make sense, period. So I'm
That's
just throwing that
very
out
fair
there.
point. I
It
do like their coach though, so I think he gets the final say in getting himself a new toy to work with.
yeah, I think people are will discount the need that they have a corner just because of what we saw with JC Horn today getting $100 million, but they had very little help there in the secondary last year. If it was me, I'd probably go for one of Will Johnson or Barron, but I don't think they're gonna go in that direction. I think they're probably gonna try and help out Bryce because that's the most important thing. They have an offensive head coach, and so I think they'll probably go receiver because they have been involved in trying to get some of these guys.
I wouldn't
So
even be surprised if Luther Burden or from Texas, I'm sorry, Matthew Golden go before Tetairoa McMillan. I think it's just such a bad class.
it is. There's a few nice players in the middle of the draft that for specific roles can do a job, but there's no high end talent. I don't think.
No, so I think we go with McMillan here. I think it's crazy how many defensive ends we've just left on the board, which is my
Hmm.
biggest issue because I just can't imagine this many defensive ends being ignored in a
Hmm.
draft this deep with defensive ends. And that's why I look at it and everything we did makes sense. But I
Yeah,
think, is this something that like we're overthinking and teams in the NFL are just like, no, dude, trenches, 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 trenches. And we just see like 4 defensive ends go in the top 10. I don't
I
think
think
I think it's possible though.
it's possible. I think there'll be more. There could potentially be more offensive linemen being taken. Taken.
That would be a wild one too, as well. Um, Number 9, I think Saints have to go defensive end. It's just who's your second favorite defensive end? No, is it James Pierce? Is it
Mm,
fella from Georgia?
mm,
Michael Williams, I've heard. Shamar Stewart, physically wise. Any thoughts?
I worry about James Pierce.
I do too. He doesn't
Mm,
impress me, but
I uh, honestly like. There's
6'5",
nobody.
243. That's crazy.
Mm, yeah, I know a lot of people like him, but there's been few snippets of kind of issues. Um, what other offensive tackles are there?
For the Saints, availability wise, we're still
Mm,
looking at Josh Simmons. If he goes that early, I highly doubt it, but he's on track to be fully healthy by the start of training camp. So
defensive.
if you think
I guess with the Saints, I wouldn't be surprised if they went for a James Pierce. Would they go? They don't need corner. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they went in that direction. Whoever the best edge rusher is. Trying.
or this is the place where a team pops up and takes Tyler Warren if they fell in love, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, trades with the Saints. Saints are in a 5-year rebuild right now. They would take literally anything. They'd take a 4th round pick to move down 2 spots, and I wouldn't blame them.
Yeah,
But if we're just sticking to picking, do we just say James Pierce probably?
yeah. Let's just do that.
So this realistically gives you these players to pick from for the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, I'd love to trade as well. Cowboys to 12 sounds unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. That would be
And
great.
the other option, which I'm not seeing for some reason, is
Yeah, I mean, who would a team be trading up for is the other question too, though.
This is again with certain teams. I just
Someone
you
being
got to
desperate
understand
and going up for
somebody's
a
fallen
Sanders.
in love. Yeah, it's Tyler. Somebody's desperate for Tyler Warren somewhere, and this is the thing that Paul and Carl and I were talking about the other day. The league is such a league of parity that somebody saw what Brock Bowers did and thinks if I had Brock Bowers this year, we would have been a playoff team. Somebody's going to see what the running backs did in Baltimore or in Philly and say if we just had signed them, we'd probably be a playoff team too. And they just convince themselves of those things, which maybe not true, but this is where Tyler Warren last year with Brock Bowers might have been 1A, 1B in terms of prospects of tight ends. Tyler Warren might have beaten out Brock Bowers in terms as a prospect last year. So people who know that are going to say, well, if Brock Bowers did that with the Raiders, who suck, on my team, he would be excellent or elite or just a superstar. So for the Bears, I mean, I don't know. I would ideally like to trade down. But if you're stuck there and taking somebody, any preferences? Kelvin Banks, Josh Simmons, Tyler Warren.
I like Tyler Warren. I like Kenneth Grant. I like. The problem is for defensive tackles, I like too many guys in the middle rounds where I don't feel like you need to do it now. Yeah. Kelvin Banks, decent. I like, depending on what you do, like it's too early if they traded down. I would not be opposed to Walter Nolan being a potential pick at this point as well. Then my other question is like, how is the leg of Josh Simmons? If his medicals came back and he was here, I'd have no problem. He's a pure left tackle and could easily be someone that you play. But the problem is he going to be healthy? And that's the question. I worry about a guy that, like I said, has got an ACL tear so early on. It's a tough one. The other one is, as a fun one for Dennis Allen, I know it says, in terms of any mock draft, it says he's a linebacker, but can probably be put anywhere. As Jalen Walker from Georgia is an interesting one as well.
Is he the one with character concerns that I can recall?
Yeah, you passed him up. He was like 18, rank 18, I think.
Mm-hmm.
A little lower.
I think he's 30 something. 32 maybe.
Jalen Walker.
There you go.
30.
Yep, 30.
Yeah.
6'2", 245. Off ball plus, very versatile from what I've understood and what I've heard. Very versatile, kind of like replaces. He becomes like a, Demario Davis type player for Dennis Allen, right? Like a little bowling ball, can blitz up the middle, blitz off the edge, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, like I don't think he would be the pick, but I definitely wouldn't be mad. I think at this point, you're probably looking at Edge or Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I think you need edge still on this team. And I mean, I think if you're going to pick at pick 10, and ideally you trade back, but I mean, we haven't done a single trade this whole mock. So, I don't want to just do one for our team. But if team needs wise, I mean, you still need defensive line. You need edge.
If you're doing edge, I'm probably just at this point, I'm probably taking, in terms of value, you're probably looking at the upside of a Michael Williams, where you'd believe in Dennis Allen making him into a top level edge rusher. Like, the production hasn't always been there, but like the flashes every single year you watch, and it is, and it's going to be an interesting one. I just think he fits very similar to what Dennis Allen would like, and I think of those guys that could be available around that time, if I had to guess on who Dennis Allen would like, I would probably guess Michael Williams. But
There you
Again,
go.
there's yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we got to the Bears pick, and I don't want to make you do a whole first round mock here, and I'm sure it's past 10, 11 o'clock over there for you. So
Right. I think Williams is a safe pick at this point too.
I think so too, and I think ideally we'd all want to trade back, but in terms of the scheme fit of what, like we said, 6'5", 265, a little bit bigger of an edge pass rusher. And at this point, what we're seeing from people like Philadelphia and teams like that is like you can just never have enough. And there's going to be some crazy NASCAR packages where guys that you think should be like full-time starters on this team maybe just don't play as much as you'd like to think that they will. And I'm okay with that.